Hey everyone, it's Maria here. Happy Friday. Clifford's here with me. We're actually on the road. We're going to get some hay soon, so it's really exciting morning for me. Coping mechanisms. I'm going to be focusing on coping mechanisms this February because it's something that often can give us clues about where we are if we are aware of having some coping mechanisms. So what are the kind of coping mechanisms that people have? You could say, okay, we have addictions, we have, impulsive behavior, and absolutely those are coping mechanisms. And, whilst most addictions are coping mechanisms, all coping mechanisms aren't necessarily addictions. I guess the favorite kind of coping mechanisms for people the most common ones are eating sugar, drinking coffee, smoking, using recreational drugs, binge drinking. There are, kind of addiction, I guess, to exercise, the endorphins and all the feel-good hormones and so on. And but there's a lot more subtle coping mechanisms that we have. For example, thinking specific thoughts about people that aren't necessarily true. That's a coping mechanism. Gossiping is a coping mechanism. Talking about other people and their issues is a form of coping mechanism. Being on Facebook, checking your Facebook regularly could be a coping mechanism. It's kind of how I would define a coping mechanism is something that gives you a sense of immediate relief when you do it, and that you repeatedly do that action to get that sense of relief and sense of empowerment. Now, one of my coping mechanisms personally is to kind of think about things in the worst, like what's the worst possible outcome with this particular thing that I'm doing. And when I do that, I make myself believe, I delude myself or, get delusional about feeling like I'm prepared for the worst. And what actually tends to happen is that instead of being prepared, I just spend a lot of time worrying. And it was a coping mechanism for me as a child, and it was a very good coping mechanism because it helped me keep safe. I was safe if I kept worrying about what could possibly happen, I'd be able to foresee possible issues that might arise, and then I'd be able to kind of maneuver those things before it came to fruition, before the situation turned up in my reality. And it was a very good coping mechanism. It was very important because it did keep me safe. So what I want to say about your coping mechanisms is that they are there for a reason, okay? So you are feeling safe or unsafe about some particular thing, and it makes you behave in a certain way. And whilst as a grown-up person, if you look at that coping mechanism from the grown-up parts of you, your adult self and your inner parent, it may not make sense why you would do those things. You might be having an issue with drinking, and you might suffer horribly from hangovers, and then every weekend you still go and you drink, and you kind of, realistically as a grown-up person, you understand it's not good for you, or you feel bad afterwards. I'm not here to say alcohol is bad or anything like that. I'm saying that, it gives you a feedback that is not good for you, and you still keep going and doing it, and there might be you might feel like you want to judge yourself about it, like, what's wrong with me? Why aren't I doing this? What's actually happening is that your inner children are triggered into this coping mechanism, and all you're missing is your inner parenting. So, coping mechanisms are not actually something to beat yourself over the head with. They are something to use as a way of gathering information about who you are and what your fears might be. So that's just a little bit about the coping mechanism this time. I'll be talking about it again next week, so I guess this is kind of part one. But my challenge for you this week, if you're up for it, is just observe yourself. So we're not going to try and fix any of this, okay? We're just going to observe ourselves, get a nice little notebook that's just for maybe even for ISI work, for Introvert Success Initiative designed work, so that you know where you can find this information. And you can put down, Facebook Live, part 1 of Coping Mechanisms, February 2018. And just jot down, during the week, just observe yourself. What did you realize about yourself? What kind of coping mechanisms kind of came up for you? What were the things that you did repeatedly that week that made you feel even just a little bit better in that particular moment? Okay, so I look forward to hearing how you're going. So please make sure to share if you want to share in this particular video. Just start commenting. I'd love to hear what your coping mechanisms are and how you're just kind of making observations. So don't try to fix anything yet. Just be there with yourself, get to know yourself, and we'll continue next week. Have a great weekend, everyone.